and welcome to this week's edition of the Maine Challenge. I am so excited to bring you this show because if you're like me, you're pretty disgusted with politics, pretty sick of nothing getting done in Washington, the back and forth, and Augusta's not that much better. But I heard about an effort in Rhode Island that is actually giving me hope, and it is the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, and they are running a ticket of a gubernatorial candidate and a lieutenant governor candidate, and then a whole bunch of folks at the state and local level on a shared agenda, shared platform, and they're going to take everything over at once. And it is so exciting. And I am really excited that we have the top candidate, the candidate running for governor with us tonight, Matt Brown. Matt, I am so excited to have you here, and thanks for taking time off of the campaign trail to talk to us for a little bit. It's welcome.
Great to be here. Yeah, really happy to do it.
Well, I'm so excited to talk about what you're doing, but first, just give us a little background on you. And I know you've been involved for a long time, but just let some our viewers know what sort of the background that you bring to where you are now.
Yeah, well, my mother was in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement and brought me up in it, and I really never left. So I've been a social justice organizer for my whole life. I helped to start the City Year Youth Service Program in Rhode Island, and was the director of that. I was Secretary of State here and worked to expand and protect voting rights, enacted the first automatic voter registration system in the country, co-founded an international nonprofit called Global Zero that works for nuclear disarmament around the world. And now I'm doing this work, which is honestly the most hopeful thing I've been a part of.
What is the vision of the CoOp and of what you're doing with your gubernatorial run?
So the vision is really driven by a recognition that we've gotten ourselves in a really, really deep hole on climate, on racial justice, on economic justice, and that what we're doing isn't working, as you said at the top of the show. And, and part of what's happened here is that the far right has built a really, really powerful political movement, and they've done it by investing in and focusing on state politics. And our side hasn't done that. And they've been doing it for 50 years with the Koch brothers and everything else. And that has built a really powerful foundation for them that just keeps on rolling in this country. And it's brought us to the point where our democracy is in jeopardy, our climate is in jeopardy, the future is in jeopardy. And so this project in Rhode Island is really a project to create a model for how we can win progressive, multiracial governing power in a whole state. I co-founded the organization with two great leaders here, Jennifer Rourke and Janine Culkin. About 3 years ago, we recruited candidates. We formed a multiracial, working class, everyday people mix of candidates for state legislature and local offices. In 2020, we won 10 races. There'd never been anything like that in the state. We can talk about Rhode Island politics, but it's basically, it's been run by the same very conservative, regressive, corrupt Democratic Party machine here. Yeah. And we challenged them and we won 10 races, and we're now building on that. And we're headed toward 50 candidates for the legislature and local races. And as part of it, I'm running for governor with Cynthia Mendes, great state senator here, who was one of our candidates a couple of years ago. And with the goal of winning an outright progressive, multiracial governing majority in the state in 2022.
Wow, that's awesome. Because one of the things that we're finding here in Maine is that we have some fantastic progressive candidates and progressive people who get elected, and often there are one or two of them, and they get into the system, and frankly, on both sides, they don't want the anti-corrupt, anti-corporate, people populist, progressive as much, and so they get pushed aside. They really try and squish them, and it may be conscious, it may be unconscious, but regardless, it has the same impact. And so this seems like I just get so excited thinking about the idea of a bunch of people going in at the same time with you and Cynthia at the top. I mean, the possibilities are extraordinary. It's just really.
Yeah, we have to imagine that that this is possible. We have to imagine that actually being able to govern, being able to give people a living wage, being able to get people health care, being able to address the affordable housing crisis, like that we got to get people to see what we're trying to get across here is this can happen. All we need to do, I mean, it's not that it's easy, but all we need to do is win a governing majority. We need a majority in the House and the Senate, and we need to win the executive branch. And if we do that, which we believe we can do all these things. There's nothing holding us back. And so the project is, the challenge is to bring together these great candidates from across the state, people who are from the community, who have been fighting for their communities outside of politics, bring them together we really form a community among the candidates. They stand by each other, they fight for each other, they support each other, they help each other win, and win enough seats, which we believe we're on track to do this cycle, that we can get in there and pass the agenda that should have been passed a long time ago.
Right. And are you finding that with, if we get out of sort of the political labels and all that stuff that happens, are you finding that among the people in Rhode Island, two questions. One is, do they share the sense that the government is corrupt and, you know, that are they ready for a big change? So one. And two, are you finding that the policies, if we take them without a label, but the policies of healthcare and doing something about climate and housing and stuff is widely shared across party lines, across, you know, with independents and across labels? Are both of those things?
I mean, really, really resounding yes and yes, Betsy. Like, if you go out to your local quarter market or your local restaurant and you just talk to people about what they think about the job that the Rhode Island government has done for them over the last 5, 10, 30, 40, 50 years, my whole lifetime. Yeah, it's a resounding rejection. It's a resounding, and not just rejection, but anger that this is a government that has betrayed people, has left them behind, has not worked for them. They've looked out for themselves and their political power. They've looked out for corporate interests. They have not looked out for the people. I mean, that is a widely held understanding. And then to your second question, yeah, the policies that, you know, are sort of identified, you know, by whatever label, you know, people want to give to it, that the policies that we are fighting for are really, I think people view as common sense and way past time. Like, yeah, that people, you know, people should have been guaranteed a living wage a long time ago. That seems like a basic right that people should have been guaranteed. That people ought to be able to afford housing for themselves and their family, which many cannot here in the state. That everybody ought to be able to get health care for themselves and their kids. These are not, you know, and that we ought to tackle climate change aggressively because it's an urgent crisis. Like, these are not radical ideas. These are common sense ideas in the views of most people. The reason that the other side in our state, that the corrupt conservative political establishment has held on to power so long, is not that people agree with what they're doing or like what they're doing. It's that our side hasn't, we just haven't organized enough. We haven't knocked enough doors. We haven't found enough people to run for office. And that's what the Rhode Island Political Cooperative is changing. We're finding people, we're bringing them together. Not 2 or 3, but dozens of people to run together, to support each other on a shared platform. And we're recruiting a massive number of volunteers to knock doors. That's how we won 10 races in our very first cycle. And it's how we're going to win a governing majority in 2022.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, but Matt, isn't Rhode Island a Democratic state? Right? So this is what we're here, right? So how is it possible that you have Democrats there? Like, Democrats, isn't that what Democrats stand for? Why aren't you making progress?
So this establishment here, it is a Democratic majority controlled state, has been for a long time, but these kinds of Democrats would be Republicans in most places. I mean, the president of the Senate in Rhode Island is anti-reproductive freedom. I mean, this is the group. I mean, they just would not be considered Democrats in most places. They would be Republicans, and that's what we've had for a long time. And they've had a tight grip on power. You know, but we won 10 races, out of the gate the first time around. People called it a political earthquake here, and it started to give the people here a sense that this is possible, that it doesn't have to be this way forever. These people don't have to be in control forever. We don't need to be abused by this kind of a leadership forever. We could have something new and different. And so that we're never going to go back now, because people have seen that it's possible, and we're coming with a big slate of candidates, and they're fantastic, and they're fighters, and they care about their community, and we're on track to win an outright governing majority and start getting things done here.
That's awesome. So I mean, well, let me just say, and you said it before too, the idea of what's possible. Like, I think we've just become so limited, right? We've so shrunk our expectations of government, and government as a source for good, and, government that can actually help people in their lives. So I think that, it does open a whole new door. So one of the problems that I think I see nationally is when you make this incredible move and you start to do this, has there been pushback? How have you been able to get most of the progressives on board? Is there fighting, or not? I don't mean fighting, but is there jostling in between the progressives, or is everybody saying, you know what, this is what we need to do, and this is the thing, this is going to make it happen? Is that, or where is that?
I think we're coming together here in a big way in the state. I mean, what the Rhode Island Political Cooperative has been building, and we've been doing it in coalition with Sunrise and BLM and lots of organizations across the state. We've had more volunteers out. We had a special election just a few months ago, massive numbers of volunteers, many progressive organizations working together. I think we're seeing the beginnings of a very powerful and lasting progressive movement in the state, and I think it's going to sweep our people into office in 2022. But as important, I do think we're building something to last, because we're not going to dig out of this hole in 2 years or 3 years. We got to start. We're going to move very quickly. But we need to build a movement here that can last. I don't think we're ever going to go back, because I think as soon as people have a government that actually cares about them and is looking out for the people and not looking out for themselves and not looking out for the corporate interests, they're never going to want to go back to this kind of corrupt crowd that we've had for such a long time. So we're on track to do something really special and hopeful here, and I think we're going to, it's just going to grow from there.
That's awesome. So one of the things I was really excited to read about was your sort of, I call it campaign by doing, right? So, and I know that you guys, you spent some chilly nights outside of the Capitol in trying to get some housing and some homelessness relief. Tell us a little bit about what you guys did to get some of that funding.
Yeah, so we had in our state for 10 months, housing advocates for the unhoused, telling the current governor and his administration and the leadership here that we had a housing crisis coming, and we needed to get it resolved before the winter, because otherwise people would freeze to death. And they didn't do anything. And the reports were that the percentage of unhoused people grew 600% over that period. This was during COVID, and this was while Betsy, Rhode Island, since April, had over $1 billion in ARPA funds, some of which definitely could have been used to address the crisis of homelessness. And Rhode Island was the only state run by Democrats in the country that had not yet spent a dime of those federal rescue funds, while people were living on the streets and we were heading into winter. So that was the situation. My running mate was absolutely terrific, State Senator Cynthia Mendes, had spent a lot of time before she ran for office, most of her life advocating for the unhoused, most of her life meaning outside of politics, but had done a lot of advocating for the unhoused. I'd worked on the issue as well. We went out one night with a handful of other advocates and pitched tents in front of the State House. And the two of us, Cynthia and I, said that we were going to stay out until the crisis was addressed, and we were sure that that it would be. And it just struck a chord. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen, but we both have spent most of our lives doing social justice work, not in government, and that's the kind of action that you take.
You know how to do that. Yep.
Yeah. And Cynthia really led this action, initiated it, conceived of it, led it, and we went all in on it. And it just struck a chord, and people started coming out. I mean, the first night, about 4 or 5 in the morning, I just heard a young woman's voice saying, "I'm leaving hot tea outside everyone's tent. Thank you so much for everything you're doing." People just started coming and sleeping outside with us. We had about 10 to 20 people a night sleeping outside in tents. We had nights of snow. We had 3 nights of massive windstorms that destroyed most of the tents.
Wow.
And ultimately, we had a night where 100 people came out, slept outside, filled up the plaza in front of the State House. We had community gatherings every night where people came and shared their stories, unhoused people, advocates, and others, and ultimately got a lot of local press coverage, national press coverage, a lot of people coming out and protesting.
We got to get out of this mindset that we got to beg and plead for crumbs and that we got to push and pressure bad politicians to do good things.
What do we want?
Because there is a day coming. There's a reckoning. And when that reckoning comes, there will be leaders to rise up and take those seats, and it's coming soon.
13 of us slept out, 17 of us slept out.
Last night was the biggest night of the sleep out. We had at least 20
Monday
people.
night, we had 100 people sleeping outside, and we also had a circle of solidarity with hundreds more joining us.
And 16 days in, the governor here held a press conference and said, we're creating what ended up being a total of 400 new shelter beds, which was about the number that we needed at the time. So we wrapped up the encampment. We obviously need to hold them to account. Yep. And the crisis is not, it's an ongoing project. We need obviously systemic change. We need to build a lot of affordable housing units. We need to do a lot of things. But I think, in some ways, what was so important about that was that I think I hope it was the beginning of a longer term public movement, grassroots movement, that will be able to ensure that we never get into this situation again, where the unhoused are left to fend for themselves in the freezing cold and a government that isn't paying any attention whatsoever. Like, we can't do that again. Yeah. So, yeah, it was. I mean, we can talk more about it, but it was it was a really powerful experience. Yeah.
Well, and I think showing, just demonstrating, literally and figuratively, what can be done, and that and that determination. I think that, to me, it speaks to that determination to right wrongs, again, as you said, certainly on the immediate level, but also then to say, okay, what is the systemic problem here? What is the systemic thing that we have to fix, and how do we create more affordable housing? And, and that's one of the things I think that appeals to people so much, is you're taking the COVID has exposed so many cracks, right, in our system. But we know that those have been, fundamentally issues that have been rising to the surface more and more, and COVID just broke it wide open. So, but the idea of doing by example and showing by getting things done and running by getting things done I've thought forever, is the way that we should really do things. No one gets to say, well, that's just a talking point for him, right? Yeah,
well, it's also, it's a different sense of time. When you spend most of your life, as both Cynthia and I have, and a lot of the people involved in the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, a lot of her candidates were out. And by the way, I said people came out and joined in and spent the night, many nights. A lot of those people were Rhode Island political cooperative candidates. I mean,
that's awesome.
Yeah, they were so committed and there and courageous. But when people like that, like the candidates we have, like Cynthia, like Jennifer Rourke and Janine Culkin, who've been driving and building this movement. When you've been out doing the work in the community, you have a different sense of time, meaning it's not about the election cycle.
No,
it's
right.
about the fact that people were going to freeze to death this winter.
Yeah, right.
And so, us putting out a statement saying, here's what I would do as governor 14 months from now is not relevant to the crisis.
Yeah.
And so you got to take different kinds of action. The other thing is that it just showed you Cynthia's a state senator. I don't hold any political office.
Yeah.
And just our organizing was able to provide some forward movement on this crisis.
Yeah.
Imagine what you could do if you had people who actually cared governing. And we weren't, because we've gotten to the point you made earlier, we've really lowered, so many of us, our expectations have been so lowered for so long. We think that what we're doing is we're out here protesting and begging and pleading for crumbs from a government that just doesn't care and isn't competent. And it doesn't have to be that way. If we could elect governments that actually do care, and that the people we elect have spent their lives caring and looking out for the communities, it wouldn't be crumbs. It wouldn't be a fight. It would be a government that's actually getting up every day and trying to make people's lives better, make it possible to raise a family, to make it possible to take care of your family. And so that's what we're trying to do here. And we think, we really feel very hopeful that we're on track to do it.
Awesome. Okay, so when we talk about co-ops, give me a little sense of, so I know that as I read, a lot of the stuff that you're doing is sharing resources, sharing political content, sharing staffers. Is there a little list of things that you're trying to share with each other so they don't have to everyone doesn't have to go out and do their own thing? Can you do a quick list of that?
Yeah, sure. The co-op provides our slate of candidates with really everything that they need to build and run winning campaigns. The candidates pay dues for it.
Awesome.
Because of that, we can provide them with all the services that they need to build their campaigns. So we do a candidate training. They call it Camp Co-op. It's very intensive. Everything you need to know to be a candidate. We help them find a campaign manager, which is super important, as you know, to get great campaign managers. We produce policy papers. We help with social media. We help them get their campaigns up and running and the paperwork and everything else. We recruit volunteers and deploy volunteers for candidates. So it's really, it's really everything. It's a statewide coordinated campaign. And so those are all, so all the sort of concrete services, training, support that candidates need to run a winning campaign.
Okay.
But, the other part of it, Betsy, that's honestly equally important, which we touched on earlier, is that we really, the candidates form a real community.
Yes.
With each other.
That support community, yeah.
Yeah, and and we're forming a multiracial, progressive group of candidates, and it's a real political community, which in this country is, not easy to come by. Like
absolutely, very hard to come by. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just that it's good for the soul to be part of a community. It's really helpful for winning.
Yeah, for winning, absolutely, and that support is key. Yeah.
Yeah, people show up for each other, and who does that in politics? Not 2 or 3 people, but
50
dozens of people, showing up for each other, knocking doors for each other, sticking up for each other, when the going gets tough.
Yeah.
And that's just invaluable in terms of, winning here, but also governing.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the point you made earlier.
Absolutely.
So we're really looking forward to going in and again, changing the mindset. We on our side here, have for a long time just been used to the fact that we have a government that's not looking out for people, and that we're protesting and yelling and screaming to try to get crumbs. And we're really, really looking forward to being in a situation where we have a government across the board, House majority, Senate majority, executive branch, working together to govern for the people, make sure people in this state can just make ends meet, raise their family, build a life. And so it's going to be a new day here.
That's awesome. So one quick question, and then I want to have you tell us how people can help. One is, the quick question is, so why not a third party? Why staying in the Democratic Party?
That's a great question. I don't think we should be kicked out of our party. Like it's the Democratic Party is supposed to be the party that looks out for the people, that looks out for working families, that fights. And, the fact that some elements of our party have become, corporatist, have caved, have become even, right wing in their economic views and other views, like, let them go find another party. Good luck. Let them go, we think we're actually like the real Democrats who have the real values.
So we're reclaiming the Democrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we're going to take it over, and we're going to win, across the board. And then they can, join the Republican Party or start the Trump Party. Or they can stand outside for a while protesting at the State House for more corporate giveaways and tax breaks for the wealthy, and they can organize protests for that if they like.
As long as it doesn't infringe on cocktail hour,
Right.
They'll be there for a little bit. Gosh, well, this is very exciting. So, Matt, tell me one thing about resources. So that's always an issue now, unfortunately, because money in politics stinks, but it takes money to run. So tell me a little bit how you're addressing that. And then I want you to share with us, what can people do to follow you, to pay attention, to support this really revolutionary way of running and changing politics?
So for my and Cynthia's race, for all the co-op candidates, and for my and Cynthia's race, we don't take any corporate PAC money, corporate lobbyist money, or fossil fuel money. The other side taking all of it. Yeah. So we've got to build grassroots support, both for volunteers, but also for people who donate. And, we should have a system of public financing, and we're for that, and we will pass that when we win a governing majority here. But for now, we've got to do grassroots fundraising, get the word out. And we're working on that, and all the candidates are working on that.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, Matt, that is, so exciting. And I have to say, in a time when everything politics is pretty discouraging and depressing, what you are doing, and your coalition, and you and Cynthia and your co-op, it provides hope, even all the way up. We're not that far away from you, but all the way up here. And I just wish you the best. And I really hope that what you're doing becomes a blueprint for us taking democracy back across this country. So thank you for taking time to be with us. And best of luck. And however we can support you through this, please let us know.
I so appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on, Betsy.
That's awesome. Thank you.